and welcome to another video. This is my 5th video in my series of making lots of videos over my long weekend. So I hope you've been enjoying that little series. I hope you've been enjoying more videos. This will be the second to last one. Tomorrow's will be my weekly reading vlog from last week. So today I thought I would chat to you about TBRs. So this video is going to be me talking about why I don't set a monthly set TBR normally and the books that have been on my bookshelf TBR the longest. If you don't know what a TBR is, it stands for to be read. So monthly TBRs refer to the books you're planning on reading that month. And when I say my shelf TBR, I basically mean all the books on my shelf that I haven't yet read. So I'm going to share 5 of those books with you that I think have been on my TBR for the longest. And I'm going to have a chat with, why I don't necessarily like setting myself a monthly TBR, even though I have made a couple of videos about TBRs. It's not the way that I work, I'm a mood reader, but we will go on to that shortly. For now though, I will show you the 5 books that have been on my shelves the longest time. The first book is History is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. I actually got this book when I worked in WATERSTONES. It is a proof copy and we used to get sent early copies. I'm sure they still do in WATERSTONES, but I used to pick up the YA ones because no one else was really bothered by them. So this was one I picked up. However, I haven't ever wanted to actually read it because the plot itself sounds quite sad. From what I can remember about this book, it's about a boy who dies and his ex-boyfriend and his current boyfriend or something like that, they go to his funeral and end up meeting and I assume forming a relationship. I'm not really too sure, but every time I've thought about picking this up, it's not really been one that I thought, I really fancy that. It doesn't sound particularly uplifting. And also when I read They Both Die at the End, which is Adam Silvera's other book, he's written quite a few, that one haunts me to this day. It was very good, but it is very intense. The idea is that you get a phone call telling you the day you're going to die. So I've never really been enthused to think, I'll pick this one up because that one's never going to leave my brain. Next up, we have got Lola and the Boy Next Door by Stephanie Perkins. This is the second book in a trilogy by Stephanie Perkins. The first one is Anna and the French Kiss, and the last one is Isla and the Happily Ever After, I think. These books have always remained on my shelves, and I think that's probably because they are rainbow and they fit in with my shelves, the rainbow shelves, very well. But I have not thought about picking this series back up since reading the first one many years ago at the start of my Bookstagram life. This genuinely sounds like a cutesy, romancy YA contemporary, so it sounds like an easy read, but honestly I think I might have outgrown it and it might more be on my shelves for the aesthetic of it being on my shelves. But these were very, very popular when I was starting my Bookstagram career life thing, so I'm surprised I didn't read them at the time, but now I feel like I probably never will, and they are just on my shelves because they're pretty. Then we have got The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is very pretty and a fantasy, I believe. It's a series that I know he hasn't yet completed, which puts me off slightly because I would like to know that I can read the whole series when I do finally pick this up. It's quite chunky. It's about a character that has done quite a few epic things, I think, and the blurb, basically the last line of the blurb says, "You may have heard of me." So I get the impression that she's kind of a badass, cool female lead. I'm pretty sure she's female. I'm just assuming that, actually. Maybe it's a dude. Excuse me whilst I still have a small crisis about whether this is a dude or a dudette. I'm not sure anymore. I think it might be a guy now. I don't know. I feel lied to. Maybe it's a dude. Can someone let me know? Not that it matters, but this is a fantasy that I haven't read yet, and I really should because everyone else has read it. I've also got this on Kindle and audiobook, so I really, really should just actually read it. Next up is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This is also chunky. Are we noticing a theme here? This is a weird book that has many different paths within it. It's a modern day cross with fantasy, god style thing. I don't even know how to explain Neil Gaiman's books. Neil Gaiman writes absolutely superbly. His creativity, his imagination is unlike anything I've ever read before. I really, really loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane by him. That was absolutely superb. He writes lots of short stories as well, and this is probably one of his most well-known books, and yet I haven't read it yet. So I really should read this, but at the same time, I think there's a book I have to read before reading this one, possibly, for better context. But I'm not entirely sure, and I just feel daunted by it. But what I did do is bought all of Neil Gaiman's books before I left WaterStones with my 50% off discount, so I own them all. They're all on my shelves. I just haven't picked them up yet. Lastly, we have Tempest and Slaughter by Tamara Pierce. This is actually on my TBR for the Shelf for Help readathon that ends this Saturday. But honestly, I don't think I'm going to get to this purely because I don't fancy it at the moment, which is probably why I've not got to it previously, which is stupid because it looks like something I'd really like. It's about 3 mages that all have different attributes and danger is heading their way. So it sounds good. It sounds like a kind of fantasy I would like to get my teeth stuck into, and I know that a lot of people really like Tamara's writing, so I don't see why I haven't really read this one yet. And the cover is very shiny and beautiful, so it's very appealing. I bought this one at Forbidden Planet years ago and got very excited to find it, and just haven't picked it up, and I don't know why. So I really should read this. And you know what? I'd really like to read this one within this year, within 2020, because I do fancy it, I just don't fancy it right now. This actually leads me on perfectly to my next topic of conversation, and that is why I don't set monthly TBRs. So the books I just showed you are the books that have been on my shelf TBR for the longest. I have owned them for the longest and not read them yet. But my monthly TBRs, I used to set them probably about a year or 2 ago. I stopped setting them. And the reason for that is because I am a mood reader, which basically means that I read a book that I fancy when I fancy it. So I often struggle to set myself a specific list of books because when it comes to reading that book, I might not fancy it. However, I recently have started setting a couple of TBRs for readathons, and I've actually found that quite helpful to try and read books I wouldn't normally pick up, because I've read a couple because they were backlogged on my TBR, and that's probably why they're not in this video now, because I've already read them and they were good, and I surprised myself by enjoying them because they've been on my TBR for so long, and I only read them because I set a monthly TBR. However, those were for readathons, and normally it's not something I would do, and I don't think it's something I would want to do at the moment. I might change my mind because I think with the booktube culture, it is a thing to set a TBR normally, and I don't know if I am missing out on a different type of content by not setting a TBR, but at the same time, I think the fact that I'm a mood reader and the fact that that is how I read best and how I enjoy my books best will stop me from ever doing that fully and ever really sticking to it. I think I could possibly set myself a monthly TBR if I said I wasn't necessarily going to follow it. Next month, for example, is the Make Your Myth Taker readathon, which is happening throughout the whole of June, and the TBR is that you have to read the books in the order they are in your character that you're making. So I have to start with a certain book and end with a certain book, which in my brain is like, the control, but also I hope that it will make me read some books that I wouldn't normally have picked up, which is the goal, although I've got some ridiculously chunky books included in this readathon. So like right now I'm reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. When I finish that, if I finish that before the end of the week, I'll probably pick up something else that's quite small, I would imagine, so I can then start on the 1st of June for the Make Your Myth Taker readathon. So that kind of thing wouldn't suit itself to a TBR because I haven't really filtered into the fact that I would read Order of the Phoenix in this month. That was more of a random decision that I would pick it up physically because I've been listening to an audiobook. Does this make any sort of sense? Basically, I just don't like setting myself restrictions on what I read. It's not fun for me to do it like that. And I know that when you set a TBR, it's not necessarily restricting yourself, and obviously it's your own TBR, so you can do whatever you like with it. I also feel like as soon as I say I'm going to read a book, I don't read it. I did create a TBR jar at the start of this year, and I have used it once for the Make Your Myth Taker readathon because I had to generate a random book from my TBR, and it picked me Fly By Night, which is not necessarily a book that I'm fancying at the moment. Can you see the issues here? Although the rules for that readathon are that you can DNF a book and pick something else, so I could just reshuffle my TBR. But yeah, that is, the TBR jar is being neglected because, again, I'm a mood reader. I thought I could maybe pick one book a month from it or something to be able to say, nope, I'm going to read something that's a backlog off my TBR, because wouldn't it be great to go through my TBR? I actually added all of my books on my shelves to my Goodreads TBR recently, and I didn't actually have as many as I thought I would on my shelves. I've got a lot in the garage, but I'm not immediately counting them on my TBR because I've actually consciously de-shelved them. So when I move out and I've got my own house and I've got a lot more room, they'll all come back out, and that's why I'm keeping them all. But right now, the books in my room and on my shelves are the books I would consider on my TBR. And of those, I think I've got something like 40. And when I created the TBR jar, I had 60. So I definitely reduced the amount of books on my TBR. But also, I think I've bought quite a few new books, so I don't really know how that maths is happening. However, I'm not annoyed about it because 40 books on my TBR right in my room isn't awful. I thought it would be worse. There's probably hundreds in the garage, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of books I own that I haven't read yet, but 40 books on my TBR in my room is very much manageable, and I could probably crush that within a year or two given the inflation of buying new books. Will I do it? I've got no idea, because half these books I probably would want to reread as well, because some of them are series and I can't quite remember, so I would want to reread the first book to remind myself. Sometimes the series recap just isn't quite gonna cut it. So that's my TBR situation, my TBR chat with you guys. I hope you found it entertaining of sorts. I'd love to know whether you set a monthly TBR, and if you don't, why you don't, and whether you agree with my reasons, or if you actually find having a TBR helps you. Maybe I will set myself a monthly TBR in a couple of months' time and do it as like a challenge and see whether I preferred setting a TBR or I didn't. Again, I know I've got the readathon TBRs, but I can also add other books around that if I want to without saying they're on my TBR, because if I finish early, I can just add more books in for the prompts, so it's not quite as strict as I could be if I set myself an actual strict monthly TBR. Is that something you'd like to see, me torturing myself with a strict monthly TBR? Let me know. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. To see more of me, you can subscribe, or you can comment down below, as I said. All my links and stuff are down below as well. Thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling and stay positive.